What if everything you've been taught about your relationship to the universe is not just wrong, but dangerously, catastrophically backwards? What if the single most destructive belief in human history isn't about politics, religion, or economics, but about something so fundamental, so seemingly obvious, that questioning it feels like questioning reality itself? Tonight, as you sit in your home, surrounded by the artifacts of human civilization, breathing recycled air and drinking ancient water, while your thoughts spark through neural pathways that mirror the structure of galaxies, there's an illusion so pervasive, so deeply embedded in how we see ourselves, that it's literally killing our planet and crippling our potential as a species. Carl Sagan spent his entire life trying to shatter this illusion, and tonight, I want to show you exactly what it is, and how breaking free from it could save everything we love. Picture this scene. March 6, 1980, the debut of Cosmos: A Personal Voyage on PBS. 13 billion people, nearly everyone alive at the time, would eventually watch this series, but on that first night, Carl Sagan stood on a California beach and spoke words that would fundamentally challenge humanity's most cherished delusion. "The cosmos is all that is, or ever was, or ever will be," he said, as waves crashed behind him and stars wheeled overhead. But he wasn't just making a poetic statement about the universe. He was launching an assault on the most dangerous illusion our species has ever embraced, the belief that we are separate from nature, observers of the cosmos rather than participants in it, outside the natural world rather than expressions of it. This illusion runs so deep that most people reading these words right now are unconsciously thinking of themselves as somehow apart from the natural systems they depend on for every breath, every heartbeat, every thought. You think of your mind as separate from your body as separate from your environment as separate from the planet as separate from the solar system as separate from the galaxy. You've been taught to see boundaries where there are only transitions, divisions where there are only flows, separations where there are only relationships. This isn't just philosophically wrong, it's scientifically illiterate and practically suicidal. The illusion of separation is humanity's greatest lie because it makes everything else we do seem reasonable. If we're separate from nature, then exploiting natural resources becomes just good business rather than self-destruction. If we're outside the web of life, then causing mass extinctions becomes an unfortunate side effect rather than an assault on our own life support systems. If we're observers of climate systems rather than participants in them, then climate change becomes someone else's problem rather than a direct threat to our civilization's survival. Every environmental disaster, every social crisis, every existential threat facing our species can be traced back to this fundamental misunderstanding of what we are and where we belong in the cosmic story. But here's what makes this illusion so insidious. It's not just held by uneducated people or anti-science communities. It's embedded in the very language we use, the educational systems we've built, the economic theories we follow, and the political structures we've created. We talk about natural resources as if nature were a warehouse of stuff for humans to use rather than recognizing that we are nature, becoming conscious of itself. We speak of environmental protection as if the environment were something outside ourselves that we're generously choosing to help, rather than understanding that environmental protection is literally self-preservation. We discuss conservation as if we were museum curators preserving pretty things for aesthetic reasons, rather than recognizing that biological diversity is the library of life from which our own existence emerged and on which our future depends. Carl Sagan saw through this illusion because he spent his life studying planetary atmospheres, stellar evolution, and cosmic chemistry. When you understand that the carbon in your DNA was forged in the nuclear furnaces of dying stars, when you grasp that the oxygen you're breathing was produced by billions of years of photosynthesis, when you realize that the water in your cells has been cycling through the Earth system for billions of years, the illusion of separation becomes not just impossible to maintain, but absurd to even consider. You don't live on Earth. You are Earth becoming conscious of itself. You don't observe the universe. You are the universe observing itself. You don't study nature. You are nature studying itself. This realization transforms everything. The tree outside your window isn't separate from you. It's part of the same atmospheric system that keeps you alive, breathing in your carbon dioxide and breathing out your oxygen in an ancient partnership that makes both of your existences possible. The soil under your feet isn't dirt. It's a living ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, and countless microorganisms that have been processing the raw materials of life for billions of years, creating the conditions that allow complex life forms like you to exist. The water you drink isn't just H2O, it's the same water that flowed through dinosaur blood, filled ancient oceans, and has been the medium of life since cells first learned to divide and grow. When Sagan looked at the pale blue dot photograph of Earth from Voyager 1, he wasn't just seeing our planet from space, he was seeing the dissolution of the illusion of separation in visual form. There was no line marking where the atmosphere ended and space began. There were no borders between countries, no divisions between species, no boundaries between human civilization and natural ecosystems. There was only one integrated, interconnected, interdependent system, the biosphere of Earth, of which we are not separate residents, but integral participants. The tragedy is that we've built an entire civilization based on the illusion of separation, and now we're discovering that maintaining this illusion is destroying the very systems that make our civilization possible. We can't continue treating ourselves as separate from nature while depending on natural processes for everything we need to survive. We can't keep pretending we're outside the web of life while living inside the web of life. We can't maintain the fiction of human exceptionalism while demonstrating through our actions that we're subject to the same ecological laws that govern every other species on Earth. The most shocking aspect of humanity's separation illusion isn't just that it's scientifically false. It's that breaking free from it reveals powers and possibilities that our species has barely begun to explore. When Carl Sagan studied the greenhouse effect on Venus and understood that planetary atmospheres are integrated systems where every component affects every other component, he wasn't just doing astronomy, he was modeling a way of thinking that could revolutionize how humans relate to their own planetary home. Every atmospheric molecule on Venus participates in the planet's climate system. Every chemical process affects every other chemical process. There are no observers and observed, no separate systems operating independently, only one vast, interconnected atmospheric dance that determines the conditions of the entire world. Now imagine applying that same system's thinking to Earth, to human civilization, to your own life. Instead of seeing yourself as a separate individual trying to survive in a hostile environment, you begin to recognize yourself as an expression of 4 billion years of evolutionary creativity, supported by countless interconnected systems that make your existence not just possible, but inevitable given the right conditions. Your heartbeat synchronizes with rhythms that began when the first cells learned to pump ions across membranes. Your breathing participates in atmospheric cycles that connect you to every photosynthetic organism that has ever lived. Your thoughts emerge from neural networks that mirror the structure of galaxy clusters, processing information through the same principles that govern cosmic evolution itself. This isn't mystical thinking. This is what happens when you take scientific understanding seriously enough to apply it to yourself rather than just to objects out there that you study. When you truly internalize the fact that you are made of recycled stellar material, organized by evolutionary processes, sustained by ecological relationships, and connected to cosmic cycles that span billions of years, the illusion of separation doesn't just dissolve intellectually, it becomes emotionally impossible to maintain. But breaking the separation illusion requires more than just understanding these connections intellectually. It requires what Sagan called cosmic perspective, the ability to feel your place in the larger systems of which you are part. This means learning to think in multiple timescales simultaneously, the immediate scale of your daily experience, the lifetime scale of your personal development, the historical scale of human civilization, the evolutionary scale of life on Earth, and the cosmic scale of stellar and galactic evolution. When you can hold all these scales in your awareness at once, you begin to see that what seems permanent is actually temporary, what seems separate is actually connected, and what seems insignificant is actually participatory in processes of unimaginable magnitude and beauty. Consider what happens when you apply this perspective to the most pressing challenges facing human civilization. Climate change stops being an abstract environmental issue and becomes a direct consequence of treating atmospheric systems as separate from economic systems. Instead of asking, how can we reduce emissions without hurting the economy? You begin asking, how can we align economic activity with atmospheric chemistry in ways that enhance both human prosperity and climatic stability? The question shifts from managing separate systems to optimizing integrated systems, which is actually much easier, because it works with natural processes rather than against them. Biodiversity loss stops being about saving cute animals and becomes about preserving the genetic library from which all future life will emerge, including the genetic resources that human medicine and agriculture will need to adapt to changing planetary conditions. Instead of treating conservation as an economic cost, you begin seeing it as an investment in the biological infrastructure that makes complex civilization possible. Species extinction becomes not just ethically troubling, but practically insane, like burning books in the only library you have access to. Social inequality stops being about political ideology and becomes about optimizing the collective intelligence of human civilization. When you understand that consciousness itself is the universe's most remarkable achievement, every human mind that is prevented from developing its full potential becomes a cosmic loss. Instead of asking how much inequality can we tolerate, you begin asking, how can we create conditions where every human being can contribute their unique cognitive gifts to our species' ongoing evolutionary experiment? The question shifts from managing competition to optimizing collaboration. The separation illusion makes all these problems seem intractable because it forces us to choose between false alternatives: economy versus environment, human needs versus natural preservation, individual success versus collective well-being. But when you recognize that these are all aspects of integrated systems, the solutions become obvious. You don't choose between economic prosperity and environmental health. You redesign economic systems to work with ecological principles rather than against them. You don't choose between individual freedom and social responsibility. You create social structures that make individual flourishing dependent on collective flourishing. This is what Sagan meant when he said that science changes not just what we know, but who we are. When you really understand your cosmic address, not just intellectually but viscerally, you can't go back to the comfortable fiction of separation. You can't pretend that your well-being is independent of the well-being of the systems that sustain you. You can't treat other humans as competitors for limited resources rather than collaborators in unlimited creativity. You can't see other species as expendable rather than as partners in the ongoing experiment of consciousness and complexity that is life on Earth. But perhaps most importantly, you can't see yourself as powerless. The separation illusion makes people feel like victims of forces beyond their control. But the reality of connection reveals that you are always participating in the forces that shape your experience. Every choice you make sends ripples through social, economic, and ecological systems. Every thought you think contributes to the collective intelligence of human civilization. Every relationship you build strengthens the networks that make cooperation possible. You are not a powerless observer of cosmic forces. You are cosmic forces becoming conscious of themselves and choosing their own direction. If you felt your worldview shifting, as we've explored the dissolution of humanity's greatest illusion, if you've experienced even a glimpse of what it feels like to recognize yourself as nature becoming self-aware rather than as something separate from nature, then you've touched something that could transform not just your own life, but the trajectory of human civilization itself. This community exists for people who understand that breaking the separation illusion isn't just intellectually interesting, it's the key to unlocking human potential on a scale that we've barely begun to imagine. Subscribe not just to learn more about these connections, but to connect with others who are experimenting with what it means to live from the recognition of cosmic interconnection rather than the illusion of separate existence. Tell me in the comments, what changes when you try to see yourself as a participant in natural systems rather than separate from them? What becomes possible when you recognize that your consciousness is the universe becoming aware of itself? Your insight might be exactly what another viewer needs to complete their own journey from separation to connection. The most dangerous aspect of the separation illusion isn't the environmental destruction it causes or the social problems it creates. It's how it systematically prevents us from accessing our own deepest nature as conscious participants in cosmic evolution. Carl Sagan understood that when humans see themselves as separate from the natural world, They lose contact with the creative intelligence that produced them in the first place. They begin trying to solve problems through force and control, rather than through understanding and cooperation. They start treating symptoms rather than addressing root causes. Most devastatingly, they lose access to the very capacities they need to navigate the challenges that separation-based thinking has created. Think about how this plays out in your own daily experience. When you see yourself as separate from your body, you try to control your health through external interventions rather than supporting your body's natural healing capacities. When you see yourself as separate from other people, you try to get what you need through manipulation or competition rather than through the kind of authentic collaboration that makes everyone stronger. When you see yourself as separate from natural systems, you try to solve environmental problems through technological domination rather than through the regenerative approaches that work with ecological principles. In each case, the separation illusion forces you to work harder and less effectively because it cuts you off from the intelligence of the larger systems of which you are part. But here's what's truly revolutionary about breaking the separation illusion. When you recognize yourself as an expression of natural intelligence rather than something separate from it, you gain access to problem-solving capacities that operate on entirely different principles. Instead of trying to force outcomes through willpower and effort, you begin learning to align yourself with natural processes that are already moving in the direction you want to go. Instead of competing for limited resources, you begin participating in the abundance that emerges when living systems cooperate effectively. Instead of trying to control complex situations through prediction and planning, you develop the kind of responsive intelligence that allows you to navigate complexity through real-time adaptation and learning. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's practical methodology for living more effectively in a complex world. When you understand that your consciousness is not separate from but continuous with the intelligence that operates throughout natural systems, you begin to trust insights that emerge from deeper levels of knowing than logical analysis alone can provide. You start paying attention to subtle information that your rational mind might dismiss, but that often contains crucial guidance for navigating complex situations. You develop what Sagan called scientific intuition, the ability to sense patterns and possibilities that haven't yet been formally proven, but that direct your investigations toward the most fruitful discoveries. The separation illusion makes this kind of intelligence inaccessible because it teaches you to distrust any knowledge that doesn't come through approved analytical channels. But natural intelligence operates through multiple channels simultaneously: logical analysis, pattern recognition, emotional attunement, somatic awareness, and what we might call field sensing, the ability to perceive the relational dynamics that connect apparently separate events and phenomena. When you cut yourself off from these non-rational intelligence channels, you make yourself cognitively disabled in exactly the ways that prevent effective response to the kinds of systemic challenges that define our historical moment. Consider how this applies to the climate crisis. The separation illusion approaches climate change as an engineering problem. How do we reduce emissions while maintaining economic growth? But this framing assumes that economic systems and climate systems are separate entities that can be independently optimized. When you recognize that economic activity is actually a subset of ecological activity, that all human production depends on natural processes and all human consumption becomes input to natural cycles, the climate crisis reveals itself as a design challenge. How do we align human creative activity with the planetary systems that sustain all life? From this perspective, addressing climate change becomes not about limiting human activity, but about redirecting human creativity toward regenerative rather than extractive relationships with natural systems. Instead of trying to reduce our impact on nature, we begin exploring how to make our impact beneficial to the natural systems of which we are part. Instead of treating sustainability as constraint, we begin seeing it as optimization, learning to live in ways that enhance rather than degrade the conditions that make complex life possible. This shift in perspective opens up possibilities that are invisible from within the separation illusion. Biomimicry stops being just a source of interesting technologies and becomes a methodology for aligning human systems with the principles that govern all successful living systems. Permaculture stops being just an alternative agricultural technique and becomes a design science for creating human settlements that function as productively as natural ecosystems. Social ecology stops being just environmental activism and becomes a comprehensive approach to organizing human communities according to the cooperative principles that characterize healthy natural systems. But the most profound transformation that comes from breaking the separation illusion is psychological and spiritual. When you recognize that your consciousness is the universe becoming aware of itself, you stop experiencing existence as a problem to be solved and begin experiencing it as creativity to be expressed. You stop trying to get something from life and begin exploring what life wants to create through you. You stop seeing other people as obstacles to your success and begin recognizing them as collaborators in collective creativity. You stop treating the natural world as a resource for human use and begin participating in it as a partner in ongoing evolutionary experiments. This doesn't mean becoming passive or losing individual agency. It means discovering that your deepest individual fulfillment comes through participating in processes that serve the larger wholes of which you are part. It means learning that your unique gifts and interests are not random personal preferences, but expressions of evolutionary intelligence, guiding you toward the contributions that only you can make to our species' ongoing development. It means understanding that what you most deeply want for yourself and what the world most needs from you are ultimately the same thing, because you are not separate from the world that created you and depends on you for its continued evolution. This recognition transforms not just how you relate to environmental and social challenges, but how you approach every aspect of your existence. Work becomes not just a way to earn money, but a way to contribute your gifts to collective human flourishing. Relationships become not just personal satisfaction, but opportunities to practice the kind of conscious cooperation that could heal our fractured world. Even ordinary activities like eating, walking, and breathing become conscious participation in the cosmic processes that sustain all life. As we reach the culmination of our journey through humanity's greatest illusion and the path to breaking free from it, we arrive at the most extraordinary realization of all. We are living at the exact moment when this ancient illusion of separation could finally dissolve on a species-wide scale, revealing human potential that has been hidden for millennia. The same technologies that seem to be isolating us from nature could actually reconnect us with natural intelligence in ways that were impossible for previous generations. The same global communication networks that spread misinformation could also spread the kind of systems thinking that makes the separation illusion impossible to maintain. The same scientific understanding that created our environmental crises could also guide us toward regenerative relationships with the natural world that created us. Carl Sagan's vision of cosmic perspective was prophetic, but it was also optimistic. He understood that the separation illusion isn't maintained by ignorance or stupidity. It's maintained by systems of education, economics, and social organization that were designed during historical periods when humans didn't yet understand their actual relationship to natural systems. These systems can be redesigned once enough people understand what we actually are and how we actually relate to the larger living systems of Earth and cosmos. The scientific knowledge necessary for this redesign already exists. The technologies needed to implement it are already being developed. What's needed now is the widespread recognition that breaking the separation illusion isn't just philosophically interesting, it's practically essential for the survival and flourishing of human civilization. The evidence that this transformation is already beginning is visible everywhere once you know how to look for it. We see it in the biomimicry research that's learning to design human technologies according to the principles that govern successful natural systems. We see it in the regenerative agriculture movement that's discovering how to grow food in ways that enhance rather than degrade soil ecosystems. We see it in the social entrepreneurship that's creating economic models based on cooperation rather than competition. We see it in the contemplative science research that's validating ancient insights about consciousness and its relationship to physical reality. We see it in the indigenous resurgence movements that are sharing traditional ecological knowledge about living in sustainable relationship with natural systems. Most importantly, we see it in the growing number of individuals who are choosing to live from the recognition of interconnection rather than the illusion of separation. These people aren't just changing their personal lifestyles, They're demonstrating that when you understand yourself as nature becoming conscious, you automatically begin making choices that enhance, rather than degrade, the living systems of which you are part. Their success doesn't come from sacrifice or discipline, but from alignment with natural intelligence that is far more creative and effective than ego-driven strategies based on separation and competition. The practical steps for breaking the separation illusion are surprisingly simple, but they require consistent practice because the illusion is constantly reinforced by cultural messages, economic pressures, and old habits of thinking. The first step is learning to perceive yourself as process rather than object, not a separate thing moving through space and time, but a temporary organization of cosmic elements that is constantly exchanging matter and energy with its environment. Your body is not a container for your consciousness, but a dynamic pattern in the continuous flow of elements between Earth and cosmos. Your thoughts are not private possessions, but expressions of the collective intelligence that emerges through human neural networks connected by language, culture, and shared experience. The second step is practicing what Sagan called cosmic meditation, regularly contemplating your place in the larger scales of space and time that provide context for your daily experience. This means spending time outdoors in direct contact with natural systems, studying astronomy and earth sciences to understand the processes that created the conditions for your existence, and cultivating relationships with people who share your commitment to living from cosmic perspective rather than tribal limitations. The third step is redesigning your lifestyle choices to align with ecological principles rather than economic pressures that assume separation between human welfare and environmental health. This doesn't mean returning to pre-industrial ways of living, but rather applying current scientific understanding to create ways of living that are both technologically sophisticated and ecologically regenerative. Every choice about what to eat, where to live, how to work, and how to spend your time becomes an opportunity to practice integration rather than separation. But perhaps most importantly, breaking the separation illusion requires recognizing that this transformation isn't something you do alone. It's something that happens through community, with others who are engaged in the same process of awakening to their true nature as expressions of cosmic intelligence. The illusion of separation can only be maintained in isolation. When you connect with people who see themselves as participants in natural systems rather than separate from them, the reality of interconnection becomes undeniable, and the benefits of living from that recognition become obvious. This is why building communities of practice around cosmic perspective isn't just personally beneficial, it's collectively essential. Every group of people who learn to make decisions based on their understanding of interdependence, rather than their assumptions about separation, becomes a demonstration project for what human civilization could become when organized around scientific understanding of our actual relationship to natural systems. These communities become laboratories for developing the social technologies that could support billions of humans living in regenerative relationship with Earth's ecosystems, while exploring the cosmos as conscious participants in its ongoing evolution. The vision that emerges when the separation illusion dissolves isn't utopian fantasy. It's practical possibility based on current scientific understanding and emerging technological capabilities. We could create a global civilization that functions as productively and beautifully as natural ecosystems, while supporting unprecedented levels of human creativity, cooperation, and conscious evolution. We could become a species that explores the cosmos not as conquerors seeking resources, but as representatives of Earth's biosphere, participating in whatever larger community of conscious beings might exist among the stars. If this vision of breaking free from humanity's greatest illusion has awakened something deep in your understanding of what it means to be human in the 21st century, if you feel called to be part of the generation that finally dissolves the ancient fiction of separation and begins living from the reality of cosmic interconnection, then you've found more than just educational content. You've found your evolutionary calling. This community exists for people who understand that breaking the separation illusion isn't just personal transformation, but participation in the most important transition in human history, the emergence of a species that understands its place in the cosmos and takes responsibility for conscious evolution on a planetary and eventually galactic scale. Subscribe not just to stay informed about this transformation, but to connect with others who are committed to demonstrating that humans can live as nature, becoming conscious rather than as something separate from and opposed to the natural intelligence that created us. Share in the comments what changes when you see yourself as participant rather than observer. What becomes possible when you recognize your consciousness as cosmic rather than merely personal, and what you're willing to change in your own life to support the dissolution of the separation illusion that has held our species back for so long. Together, we can ensure that Carl Sagan's greatest gift to humanity, the recognition of our true place in the cosmic story, finally transforms from individual insight into collective reality.